Welcome to Pody Says Malicious Compliance, where people conform to the letter, but not the spirit of the request. No standby policy? No standby. I used to work in IT support for a big financial institution. The company had firm policies on overtime, standby, etc., but management didn't like spending money. Occasionally, one of us would get called out overnight to dial in and fix a production issue, in which case we'd get reasonable overtime paid for the call. What wasn't reasonable was that we had no standby arrangements because management would have to pay us to be on standby, even if we weren't called. So, one time after getting 4 call-outs for 4 unrelated problems spread over one night, I decided enough was enough and bought an answering machine. The outgoing message was, "I can't come to the phone right now, please leave a message." A few days later, at the daily team meeting, the manager chewed me out for ignoring a couple of phone calls as another member of the team had been obliged to fix a problem. I explained that since there was no standby policy, I didn't have to be available to answer the phone. He huffed and puffed a bit, but since it was his policy, technically his boss's policy, there was nothing he could do. The very next day's team meeting was interesting. A problem had come up overnight, and I couldn't be contacted because answering machine. So night shift had tried the next member of the team and got his answering machine. Third guy had been slow off the mark and picked up the phone, but promptly announced he would be buying an answering machine that same day. Boss went to Big Boss, then came back and begged us to not use answering machines for 1 month, instead to keep a shared spreadsheet listing of callouts, and Big Boss would make a decision at month end. So we agreed. It didn't take that long. Within 10 days, we had a lucrative paid standby rota. Snoop Pickles 1731 thinks, "Ha! I used to work as a sales rep, but because we had a shortage of technicians, I was stand-in technician as well. It did not impact my sales because I would without exception only service my own clients, not the other reps. We got okay commission, but we weren't entitled to overtime because we were sales. Technicians, on the other hand, were paid time and a half for overtime. The problem came when I started having to use more than half my time to do technical work, and sometimes an installation would run past work hours, and I would finish it. I started submitting timesheets with overtime claims. The owner and director declines them. He did payroll and commission claims himself. I argued that I was doing technicals work, therefore I should get overtime if I work late on their behalf. He declined and said that I am not entitled to overtime, and that I agreed to it when I signed my contract. Okay, whatever. A couple of days later, I'm at a client 180 kilometers away, busy with an installation. I have an apprentice with me. Working hours were 8 to 16:30. At 14:10, I told the appy to pack up. We are going home. We'll come back tomorrow. He said, but we're not finished. I told him I don't get paid overtime, so my day ends at 14:30, and it is 2 hours drive to get home, so we are leaving now. He loaded up. The client came out just as we finished packing up, asking us where we were going as the installation is not finished. I told him I don't get paid overtime, so I will be back tomorrow to finish. He was, unsurprisingly, not happy. We left, and about 15 minutes up the road, my phone rings. It's my boss. He inquires why we didn't finish the job. I gave him the explanation above. He got silent. After a few seconds, he fires back that I should just go finish the installation and he will pay my overtime. I told him to put it in an email and send it to my phone, then I will turn around. I got the email within 5 minutes. He never questioned my timesheets again. I guess he figured out that a little overtime is cheaper than having to employ a technician with a vehicle. Besides, my clients loved me because I could sort out issues when I did visits and could actually recommend and advise on products better because I had the technical knowledge. And I used that experience and knowledge to later start my own business in the same field. Mike Moj C says, I oversee a team of a dozen folks when it's fully staffed. We had a fellow move out of state for school. A lady retired to care for her grandkids when her daughter got sick. Then, 3 people promote up within the organization, all within 4 weeks' time. So almost half the team suddenly became unavailable. While I'm involved in the recruiting and onboarding process, management up to 3 levels above me tends to be a bottleneck. Each time someone let me know they were moving on, I informed management and gave them a running total. We're at 84% staffing. We're at 66% staffing, etc. Ads were placed. First round interviews conducted by me and a team lead. Second interviews recommended to the next level of management. Then the process stopped. For a week, then 2, then 3. It commonly takes 2 to 3 to bring a new person up to speed to start being productive, and perhaps 8 weeks for a new person to reach 90 to 95% of median productivity goals. The existing team was ready to pull together and work harder to keep up with the work, but I took each one aside and coached them that the heavy workload they were under was not their problem to solve. Yes, customers were complaining. Yes, other groups in the organization were getting frustrated that our team wasn't getting things done in a timely fashion. I encouraged them to work efficiently and well, but to not put in extra unpaid time or contribute their own resources to projects. And if anyone was insistent in their complaints regarding the team's productivity, send them to me and I would explain the situation. Middle and upper management started vocalizing about how little work was getting done. When I played the Uno reverse card that, hey, all we need is adequate, well-trained staff and we'll be able to keep up, and managers 1 and 2 and probably exec 1 all have potential interviewees on their desk for almost a month now, I started getting the stink eye from those folks. I found out later that one or a couple of those folks had proposed the idea that this team could run just as well a little leaner, so they arranged to find out. Oopsie daisy! Metrics indicated that organizational goals weren't met, but I was able to provide the stats that proved that the team's individual goals were met. Team members got their bonus, middle management failed to achieve, so no bonus that year. My company agreed to pay for very expensive transport instead of just letting me commute easily. So, a few years ago, I worked for this dispatch agency that would contract me out to various locations. They paid me in peanuts and treated me like subhuman dirt. I even had to go so far as to be identified by a number rather than a name when I spoke with management. Management, which I hear, has just kind of collapsed in on itself due to just obviously pathetic management skills. Anyway, I digress. So this one place they contracted me out to was located far away from any train station or bus stop, and I don't own a car. So I asked how I should get there. They told me, and I confirmed with the client, that there was a bus from the train station owned by the client that took employees and visitors there. So, for about the first month, I took that bus every morning around 7 a.m., even though I didn't actually start work until 9:30 or 10, but that was the only bus, so I had no choice. Suddenly, one day the manager shuffled around a bunch of employees for some reason, and I got stuck with this new scheduler who was, I think, fresh out of college and had no clue what he was doing. For some reason, he told me that I had to stop taking that bus because it was owned by the client and I don't work for the client. I work for the company. They love to remind us this. The client even said they didn't mind if I took their bus, and that just made the most logical sense. But no. I told them I could walk from the train station, but it was going to take me an hour or two, and the only feasible transport besides the bus was to take a taxi, which would be $40 a trip, one way, so to get back ends up $80 a day in taxis. Yeah, they're expensive in this country. So he told me to take a taxi. I straight up told him, "You don't pay me enough to be able to afford a taxi." I was thinking they would capitulate and let me take the bus. But, as if to pathetically assert dominance, they actually gave me an allowance for the taxis from then on. And since I could take a taxi whenever instead of waiting for the bus, I showed up to the client at 9:30 with 2 extra hours of sleep. It was actually a pretty nice setup. Travis Maximum chimed in, "Pocket cash, take the bus. Congrats on the second job." OP, well, I would have, but what they actually gave me was kind of a voucher for the taxi, so I couldn't have spent it anywhere else. Also, probably would have been instantly fired if I got caught. Pass on your bogus excuse? Okay. Please excuse the lengthy setup for this. I was a medic in a light infantry battalion in the US Army in the early 90s. In our infantry battalion, there were 2 sets of medics in headquarters company who all belonged to the same platoon. Most of the squads in the platoon were in the first set and were referred to as line medics. They were constantly lent out to the various companies in the battalion for field exercises and so forth. For all practical purposes, line medics did just about everything the other infantrymen did out in the field. For the most part, this entailed trudging through snow or long distances while lugging our belongings around on our backs in a rucksack and pulling a sled with an Arctic 10-man tent. The light in light infantry alludes to the fact that we traveled light enough to not need a vehicle. In reality, there was nothing light about it. One squad in the medical platoon permanently remained with headquarters. In the field, they were in charge of maintaining medical records, setting up and staffing the battalion aid station in the field, driving the ambulances, and keeping the battalion pharmacy stocked. We had some guys who had served for quite a while in Alaska, and they knew all kinds of tricks that enabled us to set the battalion aid station up as the warmest tent in the field. Given that most of our training took place in sub-freezing temperatures, the aid station was the place to be. We often had officers from the other companies just come and hang out simply to get warm for a bit. Needless to say, if you could get a position with the aid station squad, you were set for field exercises. Far less walking, far more warmth, and a far happier life. There was a fellow line medic in my unit who I'll call Slug, because that's the generic term we used in the Army for someone who was a waste of space. I actually liked Slug when I first met him. He was friendly, easygoing, and he seemed to be an all-around nice guy. Over time, my respect for Slug waned more and more. He always seemed to be broke, and he was not shy about asking to borrow money. He gave his girlfriend my phone number because he didn't want to pay to maintain his own, and she would always call me to vent about him on the numerous occasions that she caught him cheating on her. If there was ever work to be done, he always found excuses to be elsewhere. To put things in perspective, avoiding work was a highly respected art form known as shamming in my unit, but there were caveats. Avoiding work at your buddy's expense was frowned upon, and clumsy excuses that put you or your buddies in a bad light were also considered to be in poor taste. For example, getting 4 guys together for vehicle maintenance at the motor pool when in reality they were each simply going to get on a creeper, a board that rolls under vehicles, for a mid-morning nap was a highly regarded form of shamming. Slug loved to sham, but he was terrible at it. More often than not, his attempts made the rest of us look bad, and they often brought more work on us to boot. For whatever reason, the stars aligned in Slug's favor, and he was given the opportunity to attend SUSV driving school for the purposes of driving an ambulance. A SUSV is an all-terrain vehicle that was invaluable to us in the snow. This golden opportunity was poised to deliver him from the harsh life of the frontline medic into the luxury of the rear medic. It just so happened that the first day of driving school happened to fall during the daylight savings switchover. The change was such that anyone forgetting about it would have shown up to work an hour early. Slug thought that he would use this to his advantage to sneak in an extra hour of sleep, seemingly unaware that the change had already brought him an extra hour of sleep. I had just come in from shoveling the snow outside the aid station around 15 minutes before his class was scheduled to start when the following exchange took place between me and the aid station's squad leader.
Have you seen Slug around today?
No, Sergeant, I haven't.
Can you call him? His driving class is scheduled to start very soon, and he's going to be late.
I'll do it right now, Sergeant. Realizing this was urgent, I quickly found his girlfriend's number and called him up. The following conversation then ensued. Hey, Slug. Squad leader's asking where you are. Apparently you have a driving class that's about to start, and you're late for it.
Yeah, tell him I forgot about the time change, so I'm running an hour late.
Me, knowing that if he had forgotten about the change, he would have been an hour early. Are you sure that's what you want me to tell him?
Do you think I'm BSing about this or something? Just tell him what I just told you.
Okay, see you in 15 minutes. So I hung up and made my way back to squad leader. Sergeant, I just got off the phone with Slug.
And?
He said he forgot about the time change and is running an hour late. He'll be heading in soon.
Do you have a driver's license?
Yes, Sergeant.
Can I see it?
I showed him my license.
Great. Take this packet, head on down to the motor pool, and tell them that there's been a last-minute change of plans. Slug is unable to make today's training session, so you'll be taking his place.
And that's how I went from living the miserable life of a line medic to the relatively easygoing life of ambulance driver and guy in charge of the battalion pharmacy. Whenever I'd see Slug in the field complaining about how cold and miserable the last few days had been, I would commiserate with him, expressing gratitude about how good I had it back at the aid station, with regular meals and near constant warmth. That should have been you, I'd tell him. It's too bad you weren't able to make it to your training on that day. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for more. Comment down below and give us a thumbs up. See you next time.